All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive global shift that is flying completely under the radar for most people out there. And we're going to look at it through a very specific structural lens: economics. We're diving into the fascinating economic realities of the modern African missionary movement. So get ready, because the data and the structural shifts we're about to unpack are incredibly eye-opening.
To really understand where we are today, we have to grasp this powerful paradigm shift. As the Jerusalem Declaration stated way back in 2001, the African church is of age. For centuries, the global north looked at Africa primarily as just a mission field, a place you send people to. But today, Africa is a massive mission force in its own right. They are sending workers from Lagos, Nairobi, and Addis Ababa to literally every continent on the globe. The vision is vast, and the volunteers are absolutely ready to go.
So, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The 2033 vision. 2. The funding bottleneck. 3. The dependency trap. 4. Models that actually work. And 5. A blueprint for the future.
Let's start right off with Section 1, the 2033 vision, looking at Africa as a mission force.
Take a look at this incredibly ambitious national goal set by Bishop Philip Kitoto. He's the General Superintendent of the Kenya Assemblies of God, or KOG. His vision for KOG is to plant 5,000 new churches and send out 500 missionaries by the year 2033. Now, this isn't just nice rhetoric. This is a highly organized denomination that already oversees thousands of churches across 59 districts, putting a major flag in the ground. But as we all know, having a big vision is one thing. Actually executing it requires resources. Which brings us to Section 2, the funding bottleneck. This is where vision is abundant, but money is not. What's really interesting here is that across every credible source and network throughout the continent, we hit the exact same wall. The volunteers are abundant, but the capital simply is not.
And this cost breakdown right here brilliantly illustrates exactly why the traditional funding models are completely failing. The cost differential is staggering. To field a U.S. or Western missionary family, it takes roughly $100,000 or more per year. That's $8,000 to $12,000 a month. Meanwhile, an African or national worker is typically fielded on just a tiny fraction of that, generally around $180 to $540 a month.
Which brings us to this frankly incredible number, 40x. Experts note that Western missionaries to Africa can live at a multiple 40 times higher than the surrounding nationals. To put that into perspective for a second, you could fund 20 to 30 national workers for the exact same cost of sending one Western family. The straightforward arithmetic massively, overwhelmingly favors African sending. So naturally, you might be thinking, well, if African labor is that cost-effective, why don't Western donors just pay for it?
That takes us to Section 3, the dependency trap, and the very real danger of foreign subsidy. Why is Western funding actually a terrible idea in this context? Let's dive in.
Missiologist Robert Rees defines dependency as the unhealthy reliance on foreign resources for funding, decisions, ideas, and personnel, waiting for someone else to do for you what you could be doing for yourself. African mission leaders today are incredibly vocal about this issue. Relying on Western salaries actively erodes local dignity, it kills local initiative, and it creates this sort of begging bowl mentality. It directly violates the historic 3-self formula, creating churches that are self-governing, self-supporting, and self-propagating.
But hey, it's not just about dignity, right? It's about perverse structural incentives. We have seen this go devastatingly wrong in India, where groups faced massive class action lawsuits over donor-driven reporting inflation, basically inflating baptism counts just to keep the Western money flowing. In Africa, credible insiders warn of a very real structural risk: the plant and demand cycle. A church planner gets 2 years of foreign funding, plants a church, but then totally abandons it when the grant expires, moving on to plant another one simply to keep that foreign salary flowing. It's a toxic cycle.
So, if Western salaries are totally off the table, how is this actually happening? Let's look at Section 4, models that actually work. We're talking indigenous, pooled, and highly disciplined models.
This data from the African Center for Mission Mobilization and Research reveals exactly where the money is coming from for sustainable African missions. 61% of missionary support comes from a broad base of local donors. We're talking friends, family, and small local businesses. Only 19% comes directly from institutional church budgets. What does this tell us? It tells us that successful funding is grassroots. It relies on a broad base of local believers giving whatever small amounts they can.
And here are the specific proven mechanisms making that grassroots support a reality. In Ethiopia, The Calais Hayet Church uses systematic pooled giving. Members literally bring an ID card to monthly communion to record their small expected family contribution. And get this, it funds over 250 missionaries with essentially zero Western salary dependence. Over in Nigeria, EMS of ECWA uses a micro-supporter network targeting hundreds of thousands of people giving tiny monthly sums. You also have faith promise pledges, mobilizing the diaspora community, and finally, the absolute game changer.
Mobile money. This brilliantly illustrates the leapfrog nature of African infrastructure. Sub-Saharan Africa has over 1.1 billion registered mobile money accounts. Platforms like M-Pesa in Kenya are totally revolutionizing local giving. Industry reporting shows that adopting mobile money can drive a 30 to 50% increase in church giving. A person might not have a formal bank account, but they have M-Pesa, and they can set up a recurring micro-donation directly to a missions fund right from their phone. It's brilliant.
Which brings us to our final section. Section 5, a blueprint for the future. Specifically, the roadmap for KAG East. How does a group like the Kenya Assemblies of God actually use these tools to hit their 2033 goal of 500 missionaries?
Based on the source data, the very first stage, the absolute bedrock foundation, is structural integrity. The recommendation is to establish a strictly ring-fenced KAG Missions Fund. It needs its own dedicated M-Pesa paybill number, and it requires radical, audited transparency. Why is that so crucial? Because 64% of African churches surveyed explicitly said they would give more if agencies simply demonstrated financial integrity and measurable impact. Here is how this builds out over time on a multi-stage roadmap. Year 1 is all about building those M-Pesa rails and launching a massive faith promise campaign focused on breadth, getting hundreds of thousands of people to give just a little bit. Years 1 through 3 are about diversifying, tapping into the Kenyan diaspora who are sending money home via apps like Sendwave, and piloting business as mission, where workers use local trade skills and businesses to fund themselves. Finally, years 3 through 8 are about scaling with strict safeguards, funding local pastors and real church continuity, not just raw, easily manipulated church planting metrics. Now, a crucial point here. Where does the West actually fit in? If you take away anything from this explainer today, let it be this strict Western partnership rule. Western money shouldn't disappear entirely, but it has to be heavily restricted to avoid that dependency trap we talked about. The rule is simple. Fund specific, one-time capacity building. Fund a training center. Fund a vehicle. Fund a member care logistics. But never ever fund ongoing recurring local salaries. It absolutely has to be a declining match schedule that forces local sustainability. The economics of African missions prove something absolutely profound. Massive global change doesn't always require massive global wealth. Sometimes it just requires highly disciplined, hyper-local pooling of resources. So I want to leave you with this question. If this microfunding mobile money model can completely break the dependency trap in religious missions, how might this exact same shift reshape the future of all global development and foreign aid? Think about that for a second. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.